Hello, everybody. My name is Jeannie Grumblatt, and I'm the Social Ministries Concern Coordinator here at Saint Bridget Catholic Church. And today I'm here to share with you a personal testimony that changed my position as a Catholic pro-life person. Before telling my story, I wanted to make a point to say that if anyone here has been impacted by an abortion or an unplanned pregnancy, that you are far from alone, and this space is not reserved for judgment or condemnation. I would like to take about 20 minutes or so to open the room for questions, answers, or ideas following this presentation. My goal today is to share with you a different way of thinking about what it means to be a pro-life Catholic. I don't mean for this to sound too critical, but I find it necessary to speak on some uncomfortable truths. In August of 2014, I became a birth mother. In a nutshell, at 19 years old, I learned that fully relying on God is the answer to most of our problems today. My story may not be a traditional one, but it's one that became my pushback to the pro-choice question of convenience. In 2014, I carried through an open familial adoption that opened my eyes to the many variables involved in an unplanned pregnancy. It wasn't until living through it that I realized it takes even more than a baby bottle campaign or a post on social media to really change the hearts of a single mother in crisis. Adoption may not be the answer for everybody, but it is an answer that is largely underconsidered. For me, adoption gave me not only my daughter hope and a chance at the future, but essentially it propelled me into my freshman year of college. Leading up to this point, however, abortion was the easiest solution. It was at the forefront of my mind and temptation because the levels of fear and shame were almost suffocating. And I was raised in the Catholic Church and knew all of my catechism, and I still considered abortion. The preeminent cause within the pro-life movement is abortion, but if we consider what the church calls us to, and we're serious about stopping them, we need to consider the human person as a whole. There are myriad of other issues to consider as we work to eliminate the need for an abortion, and this lecture will continue to illuminate those overlooked pro-life issues and offer ideas on how we can be more effective in protecting the sanctity of life and upholding the dignity of the human person in the church and in our communities. For the last 50 years, Catholics around the world have been busy praying, rallying, marching in the fight against abortion. Many of us have been involved in heated debates online, in the streets, and in Congress, yet somehow dehumanizing the issue entirely. In his encyclical Humani Vitae, or Of Human Life, Pope Paul VI said that he would call our attention to the need to create an atmosphere favorable to the growth of chastity so that true liberty may prevail over license and the norms of the moral law may be fully safeguarded. This was written in 1968 during the height of the sexual revolution. Too many Catholics have lost sight of abortion at its roots and missed the mark in addressing the many variables leading up to it. While we have come a long way, we haven't come far enough in terms of eliminating the excuse for abortion. In 2022, the conversation has become deafening, and too many people have their opinions. But not enough Catholics are walking the walk because we're missing the larger picture when it comes to abortion. Abortion wouldn't be what it is today without such a highly sexualized and promiscuous culture. And the reality is too many of our teenagers are living young, wild, and free according to the standards of Wiz Khalifa. The church leaders have not come far enough in speaking out against these abuses of culture, and too many young people have become consumed by it. There's a lot to be said within the church regarding the culture of today, and St. John Paul II, whose feast day was yesterday, gave us a wealth of knowledge when it came to uplifting and protecting human life. In his 1995 encyclical, Evangelium Vitae, we are given insight on how to practically combat the culture of death that we're living in. He reminds us that prayer, fasting, knowing the gospel, and educating ourselves on the authentic needs of others are all ways to work toward building a culture of life. There's no shortage of distractions today. While the church has made strides in placing focus on the inherent dignity of lives, it's largely struggled to live it. Living through a crisis pregnancy was a wake-up call for me as a pro-life person because I could see how my ethics hadn't been consistent. It gave me this passion to stand here today because just clicking a button is never going to be enough. The political route seemed appealing until I started my undergrad in communication studies. Even for a conservative school, God was nowhere to be found. This woke me up to what is nothing less than a spiritual battlefield. Not to be too blunt, but we need to learn to leave politics out of the conversation. Politics has its place, but it should never be front and center. Just because we can't return sight to the blind doesn't mean we shouldn't try living like Jesus. Before becoming Pope, I'm going to try and pronounce his name correctly. I never do. Before becoming Pope, Father Karol Wojtyła, he wasn't always Pope, that's the point. He wrote a beautiful book called Love and Responsibility. And if you're not familiar with this work, I even suggest a YouTube dive. It was published in 1960, but it applies to what we're seeing today. We have not yet come far enough in terms of caring for each other, and we have lost sight of the meaning of love. Today, our world is in need of the kind of love that is countercultural and that is not rooted in emotional gain, but in personal responsibility. As Catholics, we believe that human life is sacred and the dignity of the human person is the foundation for a moral vision for society. Too many of us are blessed with this incredible gift of life and are more capable than we even realize. Human beings are made to be loved and not used because we are made in the image and likeness of God. And life is under attack at all stages. Abortion is the taking of an innocent life, but the devil never stops there. There are even, to mention, abuses of media and culture, which is probably a different topic to get into. Many of these issues have unfortunately been ignored for so long that we're living through what we're seeing now. Going back to Humani Vitae, Paul VI says, "For man cannot attain that true happiness for which he yearns with all the strength of his spirit unless he keeps the law which the Most High God has engraved in our very nature." I'm really bad at keeping up with the slides, so I apologize for that. I don't think we have to look very far to see how God is lacking in this society. We're lacking chastity, charity, connection, and even a sense of belonging in our church. We have been in pursuit of the wrong happiness, and too many souls suffer in the meantime. The question that always seems to be raised is, what is the church even doing? How has the church helped women who are faced with unplanned pregnancies? The courts have ruled abortions unconstitutional, but what does that mean going forward? Are we prepared to walk with women, and are we prepared to evangelize? I think we can all agree this is a huge challenge. It's urgent, however, that as Catholics, we remember our baptismal calling and our identity in Christ. The only way to reduce the fears and anxieties of women who believe that pursuing an abortion is the best approach is by loving them. Having a consistent ethic of life means being consistent in how we treat all life. It's that simple. Life has dignity from conception to natural death, and it is up to us to cultivate, uplift, and defend it. There is always more to the story than meets the eye with those that we encounter. And there's always more to all of our stories. Women who seek abortions are turned off by their horror stories of pregnancy, and oftentimes lack a deeper understanding of God's love or value of even their own lives. This is not to mention the overwhelming feelings of shame and fear that are experienced by women who become pregnant before they're ready. This is where we come in as Catholics, to be a source of light and charity for those blinded by the darkness of this world. It also means having love and support for those women, particularly the Catholic women who support the abortion industry. According to a Pew Research article from 2014, it suggested that 24% of respondents in favor of abortion identified as Catholics. While this is urgent, it is not up to us to offer anything but love, forgiveness, and an attempt at understanding. Since starting at Saint Bridget's a year ago, I've been blown away by the level of support and generosity that I've seen come through the parishioners that I work with every day. Since starting in this role, I'm learning to understand that the scope of Richmond's crisis pregnancy support network looks much differently than it did where I came from in Kansas. Richmond is structured in a different moral foundation, I guess I could say that. We, as a parish, work between Commonwealth Catholic Charities, Mary's Choice RVA, and the Pregnancy Testing Center. The common misconception in Richmond is that the Pregnancy Testing Center is the resource you send women facing a crisis pregnancy. I've since learned through Catholic Charities that the Pregnancy Resource Center in Willow Lawn is not geared towards the adoption or parenting-minded women, and that they will just as likely refer out to Planned Parenthood as they will refer to Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities and Mary's Choice have been working together to be the major players in the game, and as far as leaning in and listening to women. I believe that Mary's Choice and Catholic Charities have coordinated at least one, possibly two adoptions since they opened 2 years ago now. And over the summer, St. Bridget's had the opportunity to respond in a direct way to the needs of these pregnancy resource centers. We gathered up to supplies for up to 10 new moms that we were able to deliver to Mary's Choice, and they were happy to receive because they are now at full capacity. I think their goal is to provide housing for women who have nowhere else to turn, and with the goals, and that have the goals of continuing their education, going to work, or even raising their children there for up to 4 years. Local resources like these are game changers when it comes to meeting the needs of crisis pregnancy, but they can never do it alone. I know in the year that I've been here, the organizations that I've mentioned have been desperately looking for volunteers. Something needs to change, and I found the same thing in Kansas. Public pregnancy resource centers have become our go-to response to a crisis pregnancy. And I don't want to say this, but they will never be enough in the long run. The pregnancy resource that I was blessed with offered an incredible amount of support and love, but they couldn't offer more than 5 to 7 hours a week. It takes a community. Yeah, as I just mentioned, that's all the tip of the iceberg. The material support is one thing, but it takes a deeper, intrinsic level of support as well. And there's still a lot of work to be done in Virginia when it comes to eliminating the need to see abortion as an advantage. We can find all kinds of personal testimonies, church teaching, etc., to help us sift through how we best respond. We need to pray and ask God to help us to be more creative in our response to those in favor of abortion and those suffering from its impacts. Saint Bridget's partners with several local organizations who work tirelessly at uplifting the lives of individuals ranging from womb to tomb. There are opportunities, and this slide goes in correlation to this next point, that February 1st, we'll be doing another Defending Life Day down at the Pocahontas building. Last year, we had maybe a group of 5 parishioners who went down and met with our local representative, Senator Hashmi, who represents the 10th District of Virginia's State Senate. And she wasn't available in the meeting, but we were able to meet with her, whoever she was working with, and to deliver our positions. And at the same time, kind of bounce around between different offices to lobby our positions in favor of bills that support life. So if anyone's interested in that, you know where to find me. So this is, I guess, leading me towards the end of this talk. And going forward, I think these are the most important things that we can do, is pray, educate ourselves, and lean in and listen. Love our neighbors. There's a wealth of resources beyond Saint Bridget's and the 2 encyclicals that I mentioned that will help us to navigate some of these harder conversations. Formed, which I call the Catholic version of Amazon Prime, has been a tremendous resource as I prepared for this talk, and they have a ton of great stuff that they stream in YouTube. I have become it's become a problem in my life and a solution. But as a parish, we're already connected to those who are doing the work. And in the words of Dr. Seuss, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, it's not going to get better. It's not. So I think the point of this lecture was to encourage people to start getting their hands dirty and to start educating themselves on the realities of life and the different experiences that people have, the different sufferings that people have, and to try and encourage us to come up with maybe a more hearty response. But I don't think I wrote the best ending, so I'll do my best to conclude this. But thank you. And no, I'm not. I don't know why. It's like, okay. Oh, yeah. The Memorare is always my favorite prayer to go to. So, remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that ever was it known, that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession, was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do we come, before thee we kneel, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer us. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for coming.
Can you talk us through some of these resources that you've got there?
Yeah. So anything to do with crisis pregnancies and adoption is listed first. So I mentioned Catholic Charities, Mary's Choice, and the pregnancy testing centers. But we also work with Crossover Ministries, who provides prenatal care for the uninsured mother. 40 Days for Life is our prayer vigil that we try to encourage parishioners to go down to the Planned Parenthood on Hamilton Street and pray the rosary at their convenience. And then these next options touch more on the in-between stages of life. So we have St. Francis Home, which is, I think they're in the rebranding phase. They're not wanting to be referred to as a home anymore. But that is a facility for the elderly, specifically the uninsured. Liberation Veteran Services is part of our feeding ministry. So now it's 3 times a month, a group of volunteers will go out and feed the homeless. And that's just one of our partners for that. And then, of course, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, who we refer anyone who is in need of financial resources or even jobs, we can refer them to them. And then below are just kind of an assortment of my personal favorite resources to use. So Formed, like I mentioned, YouTube, and Catholic Answers has an app, which I have found very useful.
Questions?
Yeah. Questions? Comments?
You know, since the Dobbs decision and all the discussion this summer, have Catholic Charities, Mary's Choice, the other organizations, have they seen an uptick in interest?
I believe so. I know Mary's Choice in particular. Like I said, they have a full house right now, but they're also, I think, still under contract on another 14-bedroom house that Catholic Charities is going to sell them. So there is a need, and a lot of the women that are calling in are actually calling in from Abby Johnson's Loveline. So a lot of the women are from out of state and are coming to Richmond to live at Mary's Choice.
They're coming from out of state?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Or do you know whether they're coming from states that are, you see, you read so much about states, there's so much out there in the press and how states are changing their laws in many, many ways. And, you know, there's almost a abortion tourism
Yeah.
movement out there.
More liberal states?
Yeah,
Are they coming from more liberal states? Do we know where they're coming from, or are they?
I don't know I would assume so. There was a mother from Kansas City. I know Kansas is trying to make themselves an abortion hub.
are they really? I didn't know
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm. They've been Democratic for the last, I want to say, since 2016. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but they are trying to make themselves a safe state to come and have an abortion.
Surprise, I wouldn't have thought that. Kansas.
Yeah.
You know, one just observation with all the discussion since Dobbs, this you're talking about is exactly the way all the, you know, the Catholic, the pro-choice, the pro-life people, the way the Catholics and the pro-life had to go is supporting the moms and
Mhm.
supporting everyone to allow the adoptions, the homes and all that, to allow moms the resources. But it doesn't seem as though it's been terribly well publicized about the resources that are out there for people.
Right.
That's what you're trying to do, of course. And I'm glad to see that. It's a great step, but it seems like so much of the, I don't know, maybe more of the, don't want to get political, but to maybe too many, Dobbs was the end in and of itself, and okay, we won, it's over with, we don't have to do anything else now.
Right.
And really, I think the Catholic position has been, Dobbs is just the beginning. Now we gotta step up to the plate and get to work.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that message hasn't been, again, that's what you're trying to convey, but in the national press, I don't think it's come across as well.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. There's not.
I'm
Sorry.
No, go ahead and answer.
I was just going to say that I haven't seen anything as far as resources or realistic steps that people can take to get involved. That was kind of my goal today. But yeah, it'd be nice to see a little more of that in the mainstream.
It's kind of been disappointing on, I don't know, the bishops' conference and all that, that they haven't maybe stepped up to the plate a little bit more, at least from what I read. Again,
Mhm.
I'm not reading everything, but
It almost seems like we're in completely new territory, because we said that abortions are not constitutional. So if that's the case, then where do the states stand on what they can and cannot do, and and how far can they go? Can they go to full-term abortions, because it's not a constitutional right to have one, but are there any jurisdictions anymore now that that's been thrown out? Or is it completely in the hands of the states?
no, it's a complete
It's-
battleground.
Yeah.
I think every state's looking at it in the state legislatures, and it's running the whole gamut from complete bar to anything goes,
Anything goes, yeah. So I almost
The feds are then looking at it too, okay, it's, they never talk of changing the Constitution, but how far can they go statutorily, executive order, that kind of thing, and it's a no man's land out there now, anything and everything is being tried.
Well, and I think that makes a case for why we haven't figured out what we're doing
Right.
yet, maybe,
Mhm.
because that is just such a new field that we're a new, like you said, a new battleground, and we've got to figure out what
Yeah.
the game plan has to be, because it does run the gamut of.
And even cities and towns are like, hey, if it's no longer a national constitutional right, why can't a city, and cities are trying things, hey, anything goes in my city, or we'll ban it in my city, my town, my county. If the state legislature hasn't addressed it, if it's not in the state constitution, then, it's a free-for-all.
That's cool.
Can you address, what are some of the main considerations and factors, right? A young woman realizes she's pregnant, and she's got to kind of tease out, wanting to keep her child, or what her options are. Either from your own experience or just from your work, what are the big factors that you consider as far as healthcare is a factor, home shelter is a factor, right? Community perception, all those different things. Is there any kind of insight or interesting thing that you can kind of share about that experience?
Yeah, definitely the medical side, the healthcare side of is a huge factor because nobody wants to go to the Department of Social Services or anything that starts with the word department. For me personally, being raised a Catholic, I was more concerned about being disowned by my family than I was not being able to provide for the child. But that's not to say that I wasn't concerned about not being able to provide, because obviously finances are a big part of raising kids. But I think the general perception of pregnancy, and this is just generally speaking, not relating to the Catholic Church, but the general perception of pregnancy is way too negative. I was asked questions like, do you need a hanger? Or should we push you down some stairs? Would that help? no. And for a woman who finds herself in that position, oftentimes the reason she's in that position to begin with is because she herself is just looking for someone to love her. So if you kind of couple that with this reality of carrying a child that other people are thinking is a problem or a obstacle, it makes it harder to choose life. I mean, when everybody around you is wondering what your problem is or how they can help you end your suffering, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
I'd be interested to hear you talk a little bit about just the things that make us, that we're called to in our faith to be pro-life, right? That's gonna cross political boundaries, because it's very simple to kind of stay in a political camp and make arguments for the niche part of the pro-life movement, but there's a lot of different factors, right, that go into being pro-life and respecting the dignity and sanctity of life. Can you talk about just maybe in our own ministry here at Saint Bridget, or what the bishops call us to, or what our faith calls us to, as far as the whole gamut of life considerations and the things that might impact women who are pregnant, that might extend beyond those particular instances?
yeah, I think as Catholics, we're called to love our neighbors, and not only just love our neighbors, but to see our neighbors through the eyes of Christ. And in my experience, doing that eliminates needs for judgment or giving advice or, shaming someone, telling someone, oh, I told you so, or what did you think was going to happen? But remembering that we are created in the image of and likeness of God, which also means we are created to love and to be loved. And I think that that's the most simple answer that I can give, is that we need to learn how to put our own opinions and experiences aside and to enter into our relationships with other people from a stance of wanting to give without an expectation of receiving, instead of helping someone because we want to have a spiritual cookie or feel like we did something super productive. But really learning how to love each other. Life is very precious and very short, and there's no time to start like right now, today. But I can't speak to the bishops because I haven't really dug too deep into that yet.
Your story of, taking a 20-year-old that's pregnant and concerned about what her parents may say, and then comments from peers about, like what you were saying, and certainly anyone in that position would be in a state of distress, and you come to doubt yourself. Oh, I make the decision, I'm going to go ahead and have this baby, and then people were saying things like that, and it would cause you to doubt yourself. And if you don't have support at home among your peers and don't know where to turn for support and help, you don't know about a Mary's Choice or other places like that, what a horrible position that would be.
Yeah.
I've always felt for someone in that position, but boy, you think about it from that perspective, that there's no one backing you, no one supporting you, not even at home.
Yeah. And I was blessed because my parents didn't end up disowning me. They were way more supportive than I was expecting, but
Yeah, and that's so often the case, I think.
Mhm.
And, some personal stories I'm familiar with that I think is probably usually the case, hopefully always the case, but probably not. But, peers are much harsher,
oh yeah.
maybe not good friends, but it gets back to the question, that people need support,
Mhm.
and financial's part of it, might miss a year of college, you're gonna need babysitting, or if you give it up for adoption, that's a big stressful event as well, and
Yeah, I think about the experience of, Jeannie comes from a robust Catholic family, and I think about kids that don't come from that kind of background, don't have, pro-life might be the farthest thing from the consciousness of their familiar, their community, or their, kind of where they come from, or their friend groups and things. And, so you're in that situation, and abortions are illegal, right? Like, they're not available anywhere. It just seems like, and I look at, the response of just saying, well, you don't want to go anywhere that starts with the word department, right? Like, going to a federal government resource is like such a, kind of has just a negative connotation out of the gate, and I just wonder, as a pro-life community, like, don't we have more to do to, like, really, like, at least, like, make the department experience a wonderfully generous, positive thing, right? Like, overhaul those departments and fund the heck out of them. So that way, the woman who has no background and no backdrop and no community that's going to be supporting her finds that abortion is not an option, but there are places to turn. And at this point, like, our options of places to turn are like a very little known, Mary's Choice. So little known that we have women coming from out of state. I'm sure there are women here in Richmond, plenty of them, that could fill that home, right? And the fact that we're bringing women in from out of state, well, God bless them, that's lovely, but, like, doesn't that seem wild, right? Like,
it is something.
And it's just so frustrating when I see how much work and energy and money gets spent, going to the March for Life year after year after year after year after year. And it's like, I remember coming from the Midwest as a college student, people dropping $400 every single year to get on a bus and go march through DC. Great. That's lovely. What if we stayed home 1 year, and instead of sending 5 buses with every person dropping $400 to go stand in DC in the cold, what if we took that 30 grand and threw it at a home or a crisis pregnancy center, or funding the lobbying to pass more funding for social programs and networks and those departments that people are looking at with these negative views. Like, I just don't understand why our pro-life community has been so hyper-focused on specifically the legislation of abortion without addressing the entire reality that abortion is happening in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so disappointing and so heartbreaking to me. Like, I'm so glad for Mary's Choice. I'm so glad that we're having these conversations and these opportunities. But it really breaks my heart when I look at the reality of what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's just not enough. And it's just so sad.
Mm-hmm.
I think you spoke to a lot of, I don't think we have to march right in DC anymore. Now we're marching in our states.
No,
So
there's still
now
more.
the money, at least hopefully that money will start going where it needs to go. I think one of the things that you said that I thought was really, it's just so, like, the social aspects, right? How we're viewing our women, how we're supporting and loving our women, and the culture that women are growing up in right now, right? Like the free everything, and like just the way that, just the way that women are targeted, right? You have to be successful in order to and you can't be successful if you get pregnant or have a baby, all of these things. So what, in your experience and having been through what you've been through, what are the things that women, or even our daughters, like as they're growing up, that would be, are there resources out there to help them learn and grow and feel like they're resourced well in what we teach, but also like how to live it out? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's a big question, but it's,
Yeah, and I wish I had better answers as far as resources. The only resource that comes to mind is the Woman's School, which is a program, I think it could be for kids, maybe teenagers, but it helps young women not only find their place in the world, but make sure that the person they're becoming is centered in Christ and recognizes their own dignity as women. And I think helping our daughters understand and really even fight for that dignity and for that respect and for that, the honor that we, I don't want to say are owed, but in a sense we are. But in helping them to learn how to love themselves. I know as a teenager, I had a hard time with this. But making sure that we're fostering a culture of light and respect. And I don't know, I came from a family of 4 girls and 4 boys, and there was a whole lot that we could have figured out a lot sooner that may have, prevented me from falling down that road. But I think the main contributor for me was not understanding my own dignity as a woman. And through my adoption, and later on, I ended up discovering it. But if I had a really firm grasp on what that meant, I think that we could save a lot of heartache and confusion.
Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, for coming.
Sure. Very interesting and timely and a lot to think about. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
do we have any viewers online?
We had 2.
Should I wave?
Are you not, you're done recording?
Yeah, okay. I had to wait so what hits the internet